In the quiet town of Hollow Creek, nestled deep in the mountains, there was a legend that had been told for generations. On stormy nights, when the wind howled and the sky crackled with lightning, a mysterious train would appear on the old, abandoned tracks that ran through the edge of the town. This was no ordinary train. It was said to be the Phantom Train, driven by a ghostly conductor who collected lost souls. The elders of the town warned the children to stay indoors during storms, for anyone who boarded the train would never return. One day, four friends, Tommy, Lucy, Ben, and Emily were playing near the old train tracks. The tracks were rusted and overgrown with weeds, long forgotten by the townspeople. But Tommy, the bravest of the group, loved exploring and had convinced his friends to join him. "There's no such thing as a ghost train," Tommy said confidently as they walked along the tracks. "It's just a silly story to scare kids." "But what if it's real?" Lucy whispered, her eyes wide with fear. She was the most cautious of the group, always thinking about the warnings from the elders. Ben, who was always curious, added, "My grandfather told me he saw the Phantom Train when he was young. He said it only appears during the worst storms." Emily, the kindest of the group, shivered at the thought. "I think we should go home before it gets dark," she suggested, but Tommy wouldn't hear of it. "Come on, let's see how far the tracks go. We'll be back before it starts raining." As they ventured further down the tracks, the sky began to darken. Thick, heavy clouds rolled in, and the air grew cold. The wind started to pick up, whistling through the trees. The four friends felt a sense of unease, but they didn't want to turn back now. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder echoed through the mountains, and the sky lit up with a flash of lightning. The storm had arrived. The children huddled together, unsure of what to do. "Maybe we should find shelter," Ben suggested, his voice trembling. But before they could move, they heard it, the distant sound of a train whistle. It was low and haunting, sending chills down their spines. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble as the sound grew louder. The children turned and saw, to their horror, the Phantom Train emerging from the fog. The train was like nothing they had ever seen. It was old and black, with smoke billowing from its chimney. The windows were dark, and the wheels screeched as they rolled along the rusty tracks. But what terrified the children the most was the figure standing at the front of the train. The conductor was tall and thin, with a long, dark cloak that flapped in the wind. His face was pale, and his eyes glowed with an eerie light. He raised his hand, and the train came to a stop right in front of the children. "All aboard," the conductor called out in a voice that echoed like a ghostly whisper. The children were frozen with fear. The doors of the train slid open with a creak, and they could see nothing but darkness inside. The conductor stepped off the train and began walking towards them. "Run!" Tommy shouted, snapping out of his fear. He grabbed Lucy's hand and took off running down the tracks. Ben and Emily followed close behind. The wind howled around them, and the rain began to pour down in sheets, making it hard to see. The ground was slippery, and the children stumbled as they ran. But no matter how fast they ran, the train seemed to follow them, its wheels clanking loudly on the tracks. The conductor's voice echoed through the storm, "You cannot escape the Phantom Train." The children's hearts pounded in their chests as they desperately searched for a place to hide. They spotted an old, crumbling tunnel up ahead and dashed inside, hoping the train wouldn't follow them. The tunnel was dark and damp, and the air was thick with the smell of earth. They huddled together, trying to catch their breath. Outside, they could hear the train slowing down, and the whistle echoed through the tunnel, making their skin crawl. "What do we do now?" Lucy whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Tommy, who had always been so brave, looked scared. But he knew he had to protect his friends. "We have to keep moving. Maybe we can find a way out on the other side of the tunnel." They began to walk slowly through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing off the walls. The darkness seemed to press in around them, and the sound of the train outside grew quieter as they went deeper into the tunnel. But just when they thought they were safe, they saw a faint light up ahead. At first, they thought it might be the exit, but as they got closer, they realized with horror that it was the headlight of the Phantom Train, waiting for them at the other end of the tunnel. "It's a trap!" Ben cried out. They turned to run back the way they came, but the sound of the train's whistle echoed behind them. The train was coming from both directions, closing in on them. The children were trapped. Emily, who was always calm and kind, took a deep breath. "There must be a way out," she said softly. "We have to stay together." As the trains approached from both sides, the children noticed something strange. The light from the train's headlight illuminated an old, hidden passageway carved into the side of the tunnel. It was narrow and dark, but it was their only hope. "This way!" Tommy shouted, leading the group into the passageway. The passage was tight, and they had to squeeze through, but it led them deeper underground, away from the phantom train. The air grew colder as they went, and the walls were damp with moisture. They could still hear the train's whistles above them, but they were getting fainter. Finally, they emerged into a small underground cavern. In the center of the cavern was a glowing crystal, pulsating with a soft, blue light. The light filled the cavern, chasing away the darkness and filling the children with a sense of calm. "What is this place?" Lucy asked, her voice filled with wonder. "It's the heart of the mountain," Emily said, as if she somehow knew. "This light, it's the only thing that can stop the phantom train." As the children stood around the glowing crystal, they heard the sound of the trains growing louder again. The ground trembled, and the walls of the cavern shook. The trains were getting closer, and they could feel the cold, dark presence of the ghostly conductor. Tommy stepped forward and placed his hand on the crystal. The light grew brighter, filling the entire cavern with a blinding glow. The train whistles became frantic, and the ground shook violently as if the mountain itself was trying to fight off the darkness. "Everyone, hold hands," Tommy shouted. The children joined hands, forming a circle around the crystal. As they did, the light grew even stronger, pushing back the darkness. The train's whistles turned into wails of despair, and the walls of the cavern began to crack. With one final, blinding flash of light, the phantom train let out a terrible scream and vanished, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The ground stopped shaking, and the cavern was still once more. The children stood there, breathing heavily, still holding hands. The light from the crystal dimmed, and the cavern returned to darkness, but they knew the phantom train was gone for good. "We did it," Ben whispered, still in shock. Tommy smiled, his courage returning. "Yeah, we did." The friends made their way back through the passageway and up to the surface. The storm had passed, and the night was calm. The old tracks were empty, and there was no sign of the phantom train or the ghostly conductor. When they returned to the village, they told their families what had happened. At first, no one believed them, but when the old tracks were found to be covered in strange, glowing dust, the townspeople realized the legend was true. The phantom train had been real, but thanks to the bravery of the four friends, it was gone forever. From that day on, the children of Hollow Creek were no longer afraid of the stormy nights. The story of the phantom train became a tale of courage, and Tommy, Lucy, Ben, and Emily were known as the heroes who saved the town from the ghostly train. And as for the phantom train, it was never seen again, and the tracks slowly disappeared under the earth, taking the last traces of the ghostly legend with them.